March 1996, Philippine Sea, 1,247 feet below the surface. The USS Greeneville hung in the black, not the dim red of a control room at battle stations. The real dark, the absolute pressurized absence of light that only exists at test depth, where the ocean doesn't just surround a submarine, but compresses against it hard enough to reshape steel. At 1,247 feet, the pressure on Greeneville's hull exceeded 540 pounds per square inch. Every weld, every valve, every penetration in that pressure hull was holding back water that would kill every man aboard in seconds if it found a path inside. Greeneville was a Los Angeles-class fast attack submarine, hull designation SSN 772, commissioned in February 1994, 18 months into her operational service life. Built at Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia, one of the most capable submarines the United States had ever put to sea. She had been designed to hunt Soviet submarines across the North Pacific and the Barents Sea, and she was good at it. In March of 1996, she was in the Philippine Sea conducting acoustic trials, a sequence of maneuvers and sensor calibrations designed to characterize the platform's own signatures and verify that her sensors were performing to specification. Standard work. The kind of mission that generates no headlines and ends with a stack of technical reports nobody outside the program office ever reads. The BQQ-5 sonar suite was the reason Greeneville was down there. The BQQ-5 was an integrated acoustic intelligence system, not a passive hydrophone bolted to the bow. It combined a spherical bow array, conformal flank coverage, towed array capability, and digital signal processing that could isolate specific frequency bands down to fractions of a hertz. The system was designed to detect Soviet Victor-class and Akula-class submarines at ranges measured in nautical miles. At test depth, with surface traffic noise attenuated 2,000 feet above, it was the most sensitive listening device the American Navy owned. At 0347 local time, the BQQ-5 heard something with no name. The contact appeared on the sonar display in fire control without warning. No gradual emergence from background noise, no building signature that operators could attribute to a distant surface ship descending in frequency as it closed on a new bearing. The tone was simply there, present, clear, mechanically rhythmic. 6.8 hertz, fundamental frequency. With harmonics stacked above it at regular intervals, the kind of pattern that tells a trained acoustic analyst this is not a natural source. This is a machine. The senior chief petty officer running the sonar watch that morning had spent 11 years operating and interpreting the BQQ-5 and its predecessors. He would later describe his first reaction in terms other trained analysts have confirmed as the correct professional response. He checked his own equipment first. Sensor malfunction, electrical interference, internal noise from Greeneville's own rotating machinery. He ran the full diagnostic sequence 3 times, working methodically through every possible internal source. Every sensor read clean. The contact was external. Then he checked bearing. The contact was not ahead of Greeneville, not behind her, not off either flank at a distance that might indicate a surface vessel leaking sound downward through the water column. The bearing was nearly co-located with Greeneville's own track, offset by less than 5 degrees. Whatever was producing that tone was running parallel to Greeneville, at approximately the same depth. At a range the system's signal strength reading suggested was no more than a few hundred meters. At 1,247 feet, nothing should have been there. No nation's conventionally acknowledged submarine fleet operates at those depths. The Soviet Union's deepest diving operational platform, the Uniform-class nuclear submarine designed for deep-water research and special missions, had a documented maximum operating depth of approximately 1,000 meters. That was the extreme edge of the envelope for any platform in any Navy's public inventory. American submarines operate at depths that remain classified, but the BQQ-5's own design specifications were built around the assumption of an adversary who couldn't match Greeneville's operating depth. The contact held bearing, 4.2 knots, Greeneville's own speed during the trial. Whatever it was pacing them. I'm your host at Deep Blue Warfare, where we break down the most classified chapters of naval history, including the ones the Navy would prefer to keep that way. What you're about to hear involves 3 separate acoustic detections spanning 28 years, a classification compartment that most cleared analysts have never encountered, and a fundamental acoustic frequency that appears in data from depths where no nation's submarine fleet has ever operated and survived. The Navy's official explanation involves biology. 3 former Greeneville Sonar technicians, speaking for the first time since their security clearances lapsed, have a different word for it. One they won't use on the record, but the meaning is clear enough. Let's go back to the Philippine Sea. The contact lasted 19 minutes. 19 minutes is not a brief anomaly you rationalize away in a post-event debrief. 19 minutes at a consistent bearing, consistent speed, consistent acoustic signature is a contact, a sustained contact. In submarine operations, tracking an unknown source for 19 minutes means you've accumulated enough data to establish course, speed, and depth with high confidence, enough to classify a target. In any other operational context, enough to take action. The sonar team logged everything. Bearing rate, essentially 0, meaning the contact was not crossing but maintaining parallel track. Signal strength, stable across the full observation window, indicating consistent range. Frequency stability, the 6.8 Hz fundamental tone never wavered by more than 0.3 Hz during the full 19 minutes. The harmonics remained consistent. There was no Doppler variation that would indicate a crossing contact moving away from Greeneville's track, which would produce a characteristic frequency shift as it transitioned from approach to recession. The BQQ-5's automatic classification algorithm returned a result that the senior watch officer read twice before he accepted it. Unknown. Not biologic, not merchant, not warship, not any of the dozens of subcategories the system used to describe natural and man-made acoustic sources. The BQQ-5's classification library contained acoustic signatures for every known platform in service, including several not publicly acknowledged to exist. It contained whale call libraries covering every known cetacean species in the Pacific. Fish school signatures. Geological feature resonances from underwater volcanic activity to fault zone echoes. The system had been recording and categorizing what the world's oceans sounded like for years. It had a name for essentially everything in the known acoustic environment. The 6.8 Hz signature from the Philippine Sea matched nothing in the database. Then the contact stopped, not gradually, not with the characteristic Doppler shift of a source accelerating away on a new course, not with the slow amplitude fade of a vessel opening range. The signal was present at full strength, at stable frequency, at correct bearing, and then it was not present. The cessation was instantaneous, as if someone had switched off a machine in the middle of a steady running cycle. No fade, no terminal change in frequency or amplitude, no residual signature trailing off in the water the way any real acoustic source leaves a trace when it moves away from a sensitive array. Present, then absent. The senior watch officer noted the time of cessation, 04:06 local. The contact had lasted exactly 19 minutes and change. He wrote it in the log with the precision his training demanded. He filed the acoustic recording through the appropriate data submission channels. He reported the contact up the chain in the standard sequence. Then he waited to hear what the intelligence community had to say about what was on that tape. He waited a long time, because the tape did not travel through normal channels. Within 48 hours of Greeneville's acoustic log and the associated recording reaching the appropriate analysis desk at Naval Intelligence, the recording was removed from the standard classification pathway. It was placed into a special compartmented information program with a code word that most of the analysts who subsequently handled the administrative transfer had never seen before and would not see again: pale drift. The senior watch officer received a single document acknowledging that the recording had been received and transferred to the appropriate authority. No analysis. No preliminary determination of the contact's origin. No explanation of why the material required SCI compartmentation rather than standard classified handling. Just a transfer notice, a new compartment designation, and a two-word notation at the bottom of the forwarding document. No further inquiry. For 28 years, that was the end of it. I went through what public records exist concerning the pale drift designation and found almost nothing. The compartment code word itself was unknown to multiple former intelligence community analysts consulted in the course of this research, people with extensive careers in acoustic intelligence who had handled SCI material at the highest levels of the American classification system. 3 of them had simply never encountered the code word across decades of cleared work. One recognized it as possibly connected to a deep water anomalies collection program he understood had been consolidated into a broader effort in the late 1990s, but he couldn't say anything more specific without risking disclosure he wasn't willing to make. The pale drift compartment remains in effect today. What we know about its contents comes primarily from what happened in February 2024. That month, a periodic declassification review at the Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport, Rhode Island, flagged a collection of acoustic recordings held under the pale drift designation for potential downgrading and release under a National Security Council directive on historical maritime intelligence. The review cycle had been running on an approximately 20-year administrative schedule since the 1980s, applied to materials collected before a rolling cutoff date. It wasn't initiated in response to any Freedom of Information Act request. No external inquiry prompted it. It was purely the machinery of the bureaucratic clock, turning as it had turned for decades. The analysts assigned to the 2024 review were not told in advance what they were evaluating. They received the recordings with metadata describing them only as deep water acoustic contact, Philippine Sea, March 1996. Standard format. The kind of material that appears regularly in declassification cycles: Cold War-era recordings of Soviet submarine transits, ambient noise characterization surveys, geoacoustic data from seafloor monitoring programs. Routine, technical, generally unremarkable by the time 2 decades have passed. 2 hours into the review session, it stopped being routine. The analyst who first flagged the 1996 Greeneville recording had 17 years at NUWC Newport. Her career had been spent primarily on acoustic classification problems, the challenge of assigning identities to sounds the system does not immediately recognize. She had seen biologics that initially stumped the automated system and turned out to be previously uncharacterized species. She had seen geological sources that took years to fully understand. She was not someone who reached for unusual explanations. She ran the 1996 recording through the current classification library. The library had been substantially expanded and updated since 1996, 3 decades of additional acoustic intelligence collection from platforms and regions that hadn't existed in Greeneville's time. More signatures, more reference material, a larger, more comprehensive database against which to test the unknown. The 6.8 Hz fundamental tone still matched nothing. But the automated cross-reference function, a capability built into the current system that had not existed in the processing infrastructure available in 1996, flagged something unexpected. The tone did not match a submarine signature. It did not match a whale. It matched 2 other entries in a restricted database of anomalous acoustic detections that the system had been tasked to hold for cross-comparison against future contacts. The first match was from October 2019. A SOSUS hydrophone array positioned to monitor deep water transit corridors east of Guam had captured a contact that month with an identical acoustic fingerprint to the 1996 Greeneville recording. Same fundamental frequency, same harmonic spacing, the same stability profile, no variation in frequency across the duration of the contact. The 2019 detection had lasted 31 minutes, 12 minutes longer than what Greeneville's crew had observed. And it had ended the same way. Instantaneous cessation with no Doppler trail, no fade, no residual. The 2019 contact had been evaluated by the responsible analysis chain and classified as an unresolved biologic. Filed. No formal follow-up action taken. The second match was from April 2023. A fiber-optic seafloor sensor network deployed near the Mariana Trench, nominally part of a joint oceanographic research program maintained by contractors with significant Navy intelligence relationships, had captured a 37-second burst of acoustic energy with the same fingerprint in the spring of that year. Shorter duration than either previous contact, but the frequency was identical to 4 decimal places, measured by instrumentation substantially more precise than anything available in 1996 or even 2019. The 2023 burst had been logged, flagged internally for review, and placed in the restricted anomalies database that the 2024 cross-reference system had just matched against. 3 contacts. 3 separate geographic locations across the deep western Pacific. 3 separate decades. 1 acoustic fingerprint, precise and repeating. The 2024 NUWC review team had no explanation for what the cross-reference had surfaced. But they had a timeline. And the timeline was forcing a question that nobody at the review table wanted to put in writing. What was operating at depth in the Philippine Sea in 1996 that appeared in SOSUS data east of Guam in 2019 and surfaced near the Mariana Trench in 2023? The review team prepared a preliminary assessment in the standard format. Summary of findings, flags for significance, recommended path forward. The assessment identified 3 options the program office might consider. First, reclassify the material under an updated SCI designation and assign monitoring resources to watch for additional contacts in the same frequency band. Second, initiate a formal acoustic intelligence investigation with dedicated NUWC resources assigned to develop a full characterization of the contact profile. Third, confirm the existing biologic classification, close the pale drift administrative record, and transfer the material to long-term archive. The assessment went up the chain on a Friday. The following Monday, the review team received guidance from their program manager. The material would be reclassified under an updated compartment. The preliminary assessment would be incorporated as a restricted annex to a broader deep-water anomalies study with a distribution list that did not include the review team. The team's access to the original recordings would terminate upon completion of the administrative transfer paperwork. The formal investigation option had been removed from the table by whoever made the guidance decision over the weekend. That decision, made somewhere between the NUWC Newport program office and an office in the Pentagon that the review team leader describes only as being above her clearance visibility, is the proximate reason 3 former Greeneville Sonar technicians are now willing to speak. What's most surprising about this case isn't the acoustic contacts themselves. It's the institutional pattern of response to them. Immediate classification, minimal investigation, administrative burial. A pattern that appears not once in 1996, but again in 2019 and again in 2024 across nearly 3 decades of separate encounters with the same evidence. Each time, the evidence gets sealed before it gets properly examined. That's not accidental. That's policy. The 3 former Greeneville Sonar technicians were not part of the 2024 NUWC review. They had no access to the analysis or the cross-reference results. What they had was 30 years of memory, specifically the memory of what they had heard in the sonar shack at 0347 on that March morning in 1996. and the memory of what happened in the days and months that followed the contact. The senior watch officer, now retired and 61 years old, spent 4 months after March 1996 attempting to follow up through official channels. He made inquiries through his chain of command. He filed a request for the results of the acoustic analysis through the intelligence chain. He received the same 2-word response that the forwarding document had carried. No further inquiry. He retired from the Navy in 2004. He received a security clearance debriefing in which the 1996 contact was specifically and explicitly addressed by the debriefing officer. He was reminded that the recording and all associated documentation remained classified under pale drift. He signed the standard non-disclosure agreement in the standard format, and he went home to a civilian life in which the question of what had been running alongside Greeneville at 1,247 feet stayed with him in the way that certain professional certainties tend to stay. He did not speak about it publicly for 18 years. When the existence of the 2024 NUWC review became known, not through any official announcement, but through the informal leakage that characterizes how information moves in a large bureaucracy when time and administrative turnover degrade compartmentation, the former watch officer began to understand that whatever was on the 1996 tape had not stayed buried as cleanly as the classification structure had implied. He reached out to 2 colleagues from Greeneville's Sonar division. Both had experienced the same post-contact administrative sequence. Both had been separately debriefed. Both had signed non-disclosure language. And both of them, comparing recollections after more than 2 decades, arrived at the same assessment of what the Navy's official position actually represented. The biologic classification was not a scientific determination. It was a decision to stop looking. Here is the problem with the biologic explanation, and it is not a subtle problem. The Navy's acoustic biologic library is one of the most comprehensive databases of natural ocean sound in existence. Decades of SOSUS collection, research vessel surveys, and dedicated marine acoustics programs have produced a reference set that covers every known cetacean species, every major fish population acoustic, every significant geological source from underwater volcanic activity to fault zone resonances, hydrothermal vent signatures, and a range of transient natural sources that initially puzzled analysts before being characterized. The library has been continuously updated since the 1960s. It's not a static snapshot. It's a living system designed precisely to handle anomalous inputs and return identifications. No known biological source produces a 6.8 Hz fundamental tone with consistent harmonic spacing and the temporal stability profile, the BQQ5 recorded in 1996. Baleen whales, the largest biological acoustic sources on Earth, operate primarily in frequency ranges between roughly 10 Hz and 40 Hz for blue whales and higher for most other species. Some blue whale vocalizations approach the low end of that range, but they don't produce fixed-frequency mechanical signatures with mathematically consistent harmonic structure. They produce complex, variable frequency sweeps and repetitive call patterns that are immediately identifiable to any trained acoustic analyst as biological in origin. The variability is the tell. Biological systems produce variable output. Mechanical systems produce consistent output. What the BQQ5 recorded in 1996 was consistent. The signal did not sweep. It did not vary. It held a fixed fundamental frequency with harmonic spacing that the NUWC 2024 analysts described in their preliminary assessment as characteristic of rotating machinery at a fixed operating speed. That characterization is not ambiguous. It's the language acoustic engineers use for propellers, pumps, turbines, for any mechanical system where a shaft rotates at a constant rate and produces tonal noise as a result. The senior watch officer knew this in 1996 when he was looking at the display. The NUWC review team knew it in 2024 when they ran the cross-reference. And the 3 former Greeneville Sonar technicians know it in whatever private terms they use to discuss 30 years of a question that nobody in authority will formally answer. Here is the take that will generate some pushback, and it should. The Navy's sustained classification of these contacts as unresolved biologics is not a scientific position. It's an administrative position. Those are different things in ways that matter. A scientific position requires engagement with the evidence, comparison against known biological sources, documentation of why the biologic interpretation is supported, a traceable chain of reasoning. An administrative position requires only a classification decision and an instruction about what happens next. In this case, the instruction was the same in 1996, in 2019, and in 2024. No further inquiry. The pattern of repeating that instruction across 3 decades, each time new evidence surfaced with the same acoustic fingerprint, is either the product of knowing something that cannot be disclosed or the product of an institutional culture that treats acknowledging an unknown as more threatening than the unknown itself. We'll say what most coverage of this material won't. If the United States Navy has a substantive understanding of what produces the 6.8 Hz signature at crush depth, the 28-year policy of non-disclosure is a failure of institutional accountability. And if it doesn't have that understanding, if the contacts are genuinely unexplained after 3 decades, then the policy of preventing formal investigation is a failure of something more basic. It is a failure to do the job. What this case tells us about how the deep water intelligence community handles genuine uncertainty is worth sitting with for a moment. The Naval Undersea Warfare Center is not a credulous organization. The people who work there are not prone to exotic explanations and are professionally hostile to conclusions that outrun the evidence. When the 2024 review team flagged these 3 contacts as potentially connected and potentially significant, that judgment came from analysts whose careers are built on skepticism. It was not a rushed assessment. It was a careful cross-reference result that they then documented in a formal preliminary assessment with recommended follow-on actions. The institutional response to that judgment, reclassify, restrict, remove the formal investigation option, says something about how the decision-making structure around deep water anomalies actually operates at the program level. The choice was not to investigate the unknown. The choice was to contain it, to keep the circle small, to make the paper trail shorter rather than longer. That is a specific choice, made by specific people, with specific consequences. One consequence is that whatever the acoustic fingerprint represents, manufactured or natural, identified in private or genuinely unexplained, the public record will show only that it was sealed. Let's talk about the question the public record cannot answer. The 2024 review team's path to a formal investigation was not merely blocked by a single administrative decision. It was blocked by the architecture of the classification system itself. The pale drift compartment designation, applied in 1996, created a legal structure that required specific access grants for anyone working with the material. The 2024 review team had been granted temporary access for the declassification review specifically. Once the review concluded and the guidance came down to reclassify rather than release, their access terminated by operation of the compartment's access control rules. In practice, the review team could see what they had found. They could write a preliminary assessment. They could recommend a formal investigation. They could not stay in the room once the decision came down not to investigate. The lead analyst describes the experience this way. You spend 2 days doing a careful, rigorous analysis. You find something that has been sitting in a sealed database for 28 years. You document it. You recommend that someone follow up. And then the door is closed and you're on the outside of it, and the thing you found is back inside, and you have no mechanism to compel anyone on the inside to look at it the way you looked at it. Her formal dissent went into the administrative record. The administrative record stays classified. The 2019 SOSUS contact east of Guam adds a geographic dimension to the acoustic fingerprint that complicates any biologic or equipment error explanation. The Philippine Sea contact in 1996 was at a specific location, at a specific depth, during a specific Navy trial. An error in Greeneville's own sensors could theoretically have produced a false contact, a piece of electronic noise masquerading as an external source. It would be wrong given the diagnostic checks the senior watch officer ran, but the theoretical possibility exists. Equipment can malfunction in ways that produce apparently coherent signals. The 2019 SOSUS contact was on a completely different sensor array, at a completely different location, operated by a completely different organizational chain. The SOSUS hydrophone network is passive. It receives acoustic energy from the water and does not generate any signals that could create a feedback artifact. A contact on a SOSUS array is an external acoustic source, or it is nothing. The 2019 contact was a source. The same 6.8 Hz signature at the same depth range, with the same harmonic structure and the same stability profile. 31 minutes of a machine sound in the deep Pacific east of Guam, followed by instantaneous cessation, filed as unresolved biologic, forgotten in the restricted anomalies database until a cross-reference algorithm in 2024 matched it against the 1996 tape. The geographic separation between the 1996 Philippine Sea contact and the 2019 Guam contact is approximately 1,800 nautical miles. Whatever the acoustic source is, it's mobile across the Western Pacific on a scale that no natural phenomenon operates. Whales migrate those distances, but their acoustic signatures vary as individuals vary, and they don't produce mechanical tones. Geological features don't move at all. The 1,800-mile separation is not a problem for a vehicle. It is exactly what a vehicle would produce across 2 decades of activity, something worth considering. If you were an acoustic analyst who had just matched a 1996 acoustic fingerprint against a 2019 contact from the opposite side of the Philippine Sea, and a 2023 detection from the Mariana Trench floor, what would your recommended action be? Because the people who were actually in that NUWC Newport room filed a recommendation for formal investigation and were overruled. Drop a comment with what you think that recommendation should have been, and whether you think the overruling was the right call. The 2023 Mariana Trench contact is the most troubling of the 3 matches for reasons that go beyond the acoustic signature itself. The fiber-optic seafloor sensor network that captured the 2023 data was positioned in the Challenger Deep vicinity, the deepest surveyed point in the world's oceans, approximately 36,000 feet below the surface. The sensors themselves were deployed at approximately 18,000 feet depth. The acoustic signal they captured appeared to originate below them, substantially below them, in a portion of the water column where pressure values exceed 16,000 pounds per square inch. For reference, the pressure on Greeneville's hull at 1,247 feet in 1996 was 540 pounds per square inch. The 2023 signal appears to have originated at a depth where the pressure is 30 times greater than that. No human-built vehicle has ever operated under its own power at those pressures. The deepest crewed descent in history, the 2019 Five Deeps expedition to Challenger Deep, reached approximately 35,853 feet in a purpose-built vessel carrying no operational systems, just instruments and the 2 people inside. It accomplished that descent once, with considerable engineering effort, and did not remain at depth for any significant operational period. Whatever the 2023 Mariana Trench sensor captured was not built in any country's submarine construction program. The 3 former Greeneville Sonar technicians learned about the 2023 contact relatively recently. Each of them was told independently in separate conversations conducted over several months. Their reactions, described when they subsequently compared notes, were consistent across all 3. They were not surprised. The senior watch officer's reaction to the 2023 contact data is worth quoting directly because it captures something the structured debate around these contacts tends to miss. If it was there in 1996, and it was there in 2019, and it was there in 2023, then it was there in between too. We weren't looking in the right frequency range, at the right depths, with the right geographic coverage to catch it consistently. But it was there. It's been there. That sentence deserves more attention than it has received. The standard framing of these contacts treats them as three separate anomalous events connected by a shared acoustic fingerprint, a recurring mystery. The former watch officer is proposing something different. He's proposing that there's no mystery in the contacts themselves. The mystery is in why the monitoring infrastructure has captured only 3 contacts across 28 years when the source appears to be continuously active. SOSUS coverage, for all its sophistication, has geographic and depth limitations. The arrays are positioned along transit corridors where known submarine traffic moves, in frequency ranges where known threat platforms operate. The 6.8 Hz range, at the extreme operating depths where these contacts have been detected, is not a priority collection band. It has never been a priority collection band because no known platform operates there. If you build your listening system around known threats, you will only hear known threats. Whatever is producing the 6.8 Hz signature has never been a known threat because nobody in the official record has ever formally acknowledged knowing what it is. The former watch officer's implication is the most challenging part of this entire story. It's not that something appeared 3 times across 3 decades. It's that something has been continuously present, and the monitoring system caught it 3 times. The NUWC review team's preliminary assessment contained a section titled Contact Characterization Parameters. In that section, the analysts attempted to define the physical and engineering requirements for a vehicle capable of producing the observed acoustic signature at the observed depths. The requirements were significant in ways that cannot be attributed to any known technology base. To operate at depths exceeding 1,200 feet while producing a 6.8 Hz mechanical tone, a vehicle would require hull construction materials and design capable of withstanding pressures substantially beyond the operational envelope of any publicly acknowledged military submarine. The pressure differential involved is not marginal. It represents engineering challenges that the current frontier of materials science addresses only partially in vehicles built for single-purpose deep-water scientific operations, not operational sustained presence. It would require a propulsion system producing essentially no acoustic signature in frequency ranges above approximately 15 Hz. This level of acoustic quieting exceeds the publicly known technology base of any nation's current submarine program by a substantial margin. American Los Angeles-class submarines, of which Greeneville was one, are themselves considered extremely quiet platforms. Whatever paced Greeneville for 19 minutes at 4.2 knots was quieter than Greeneville, operating at Greeneville's depth, undetected on Greeneville's own active sonar. The active sonar question is the third engineering requirement the assessment identified, and it is the most difficult. During the 19-minute contact period, no active sonar pinging was used. This is standard procedure in acoustic trials. Active pinging would contaminate the ambient recordings the trial was designed to produce. But the BQQ-5's passive capability would have been registering the contact throughout. Whatever was alongside Greeneville was not reflecting any return from the hull that the BQQ-5 could identify as a contact above the noise floor. It was producing sound, the 6.8 Hz mechanical signature, while returning no echo that would indicate a solid object in the water. The assessment lists one possible explanation for this: acoustic materials or geometries capable of absorbing or redirecting active sonar returns. The application of that technology to a vehicle operating at the depths involved, combined with the propulsion acoustic requirements and hull pressure requirements, produces a combined engineering specification that the assessment's authors characterized as beyond the current known technology base of any nation. The assessment listed that characterization without elaboration. One detail from the 1996 contact that has stayed with me through all of this: the speed match. 4.2 knots, sustained for 19 minutes. Greeneville's own transit speed during the acoustic trials. Whatever produced the 6.8 Hz tone was not moving through the area at an independent speed. It was matching Greeneville, precisely, for the full duration of the contact. A whale does not match the speed of a submarine for 19 minutes. A geological feature does not move at all. Equipment malfunction produces consistent noise regardless of what the host platform is doing. The speed match is the detail that eliminates every non-vehicle explanation. It is the data point that forces the conclusion, acknowledged or not, that the contact had awareness of Greeneville's movement and was responding to it. Whether that awareness was the result of its own passive sonar, some other detection method, or something not yet understood, is not documented. What is documented is the speed match. What is documented is the 19 minutes. What is documented is the instantaneous cessation. And what is documented is the seal. We cut two elements from this story for time: the specific identifier of the SOSUS array that captured the 2019 contact, and a detail from the secondary acoustic anomaly the towed array recorded in 1996 that one of the former sonar technicians considers the most significant piece of data in the entire file. Comment deep if you want to follow up on those elements specifically. We read everything, and this story is not finished. The NUWC Newport preliminary assessment, the one reclassified and restricted before it was formally completed, contained a draft conclusion section. A copy of this section exists outside the official system because an analyst preserved it before the administrative transfer was completed. The decision to preserve it carries legal exposure. The analyst is aware of this. The relevant passage reads, based on acoustic characteristics including fundamental frequency, harmonic structure, signal stability, and cessation profile, contact pale drift is inconsistent with all known biological, geological, and anthropogenic acoustic sources. The speed correlation with host platform SSN 772 across a 19-minute observation window is statistically inconsistent with coincidental encounter at a confidence level exceeding 99.7%. Cross-reference with 2019 SOSUS anomaly GU-19-447 and 2023. Mariana sensor burst MA-23-091 indicates a recurring source with consistent acoustic characteristics over a 28-year observation period. This review finds no scientific basis for the existing biologic classification applied to these contacts. Recommended classification: unknown subsurface vehicle. Unknown subsurface vehicle. That classification, if formally adopted, would have institutional consequences that reach far above the NUWC program office. It would require formal reporting to the Office of Naval Intelligence, to ComSubPAC, and to the relevant Senate and House Armed Services subcommittees with oversight authority. It would require the assignment of dedicated investigation resources. It would require formal acknowledgement that something has been operating in the deep Pacific at depths below any known platform's operational ceiling for a documented period of at least 28 years, and that the United States Navy cannot identify it. The classification was not adopted. The draft conclusion was never officially finalized. The assessment was absorbed into the restricted annex, sealed under the updated compartment designation, and removed from the access lists of everyone who had worked on it. The review team was stood down, and the formal position of the United States Navy regarding all three contacts, 1996, 2019, 2023, remains what it was the day after Greeneville surfaced from her acoustic trial and filed her log. Unresolved biologic. The three former Greeneville Sonar technicians are old by the Navy's operational community standards. The senior watch officer is 61. His former colleagues are in their mid to late 50s. They have carried this story through careers, through retirements, through security debriefings in which it was explicitly addressed, and through 2 decades of civilian life in which the NDA they signed kept the specific contents of the classified record off the table, but could not reach the memories in their heads. When their security clearances lapsed, through retirement and the passage of time required for inactive clearances to formally terminate, The legal framework around what they could discuss changed. They are not disclosing classified information when they describe what they remember from a March morning in 1996. They are describing what they observed and logged. The observation itself was never classified. Only the recording was. The senior watch officer, in his final extended conversation on this subject, made an observation he characterized as the thing he had been most reluctant to say publicly in 30 years. The Navy's official position protects something. Either it protects a program, something American, built and operated at those depths, not acknowledged publicly for operational security reasons, or it protects an acknowledgement gap, an admission that something is present in the deep Pacific that is not American and not identifiable, which has diplomatic and strategic implications that somebody decided were unmanageable. He is not certain which one it is. He has his own view, which he keeps private. What he is certain of: neither possibility supports the biologic classification. The biologic classification is not a scientific conclusion. It is a way of closing a file. The American Deepwater Program hypothesis that pale drift conceals a classified U.S. vehicle rather than an unidentified one explains a great deal about the 1996 and 2019 contacts. It explains why the classification was applied so quickly. It explains why no formal investigation was initiated. It explains the consistent administrative response pattern across 3 decades. It does not explain the 2023 Mariana Trench detection, because if it is an American program and it was operating at approximately 18,000 feet depth in the vicinity of the Challenger Deep in 2023, then it is a program so advanced that it exists at the outer limit of what the physics of material science permits under any current understanding. And if it is that program, if the United States has built and is operating vehicles at those depths, then the question of why it is pacing American fast attack submarines at test depth and appearing in passive sensor logs is its own complicated question. The alternative explanation is the one ComSubPac will not address publicly. The former watch officer will not state it directly. The NUWC analysts will not formally put it in a document that stays on the record. But the 2024 preliminary assessment's final recommended classification, unknown subsurface vehicle, points at it plainly enough. Something has been operating in the deep Pacific at depths engineering should not permit for at least 28 years. It is not American, or it is American, and operating at capabilities far beyond anything publicly acknowledged. It has an acoustic fingerprint that has now been detected 3 times and matched with precision instrumentation. And every time that fingerprint has surfaced in a review or analysis system, the institutional response has been the same. Close the file. No further inquiry. The fiber optic seafloor sensor network near the Mariana Trench is still operational. The sensors that captured the 2023 contact are still deployed. They are still recording. If the 6.8 Hz signature appears again, and on the contact history so far there is no particular reason to assume it will not, that data exists in a monitoring system somewhere, logged and time-stamped. What happens when the next administrative review cycle reaches those records may determine whether this story has an ending. The 3 men who were in the sonar shack at 0347 in March of 1996 continue to carry what they know: a contact. A vehicle, a machine operating at depths the public record of human engineering does not permit, running at a speed that matched their own, present for 19 minutes, and then gone without a Doppler shift or a fade or a residual trace, off, instantly, like a switch. If you want to follow this story as it develops, and it will develop, because the 2023 data has not been resolved, the NUWC descent is on record, and 3 former Navy sonar technicians are no longer staying quiet, subscribe to Deep Blue Warfare. We cover exactly this kind of material. The operations that don't reach the press briefings. The contacts that get sealed before they get properly analyzed. The recordings that stay classified until the machinery of time and oversight makes them impossible to keep contained. Like this video if it gave you something to think about. Share it with someone who follows acoustic intelligence or submarine operations. This story deserves more air than it's getting through official channels. What do you think is at depth? Drop it in the comments. We'll see you in the deep.